This by now should be a dead topic, but it still seems like the last resort for anyone who is out of any reasonable argument against Islam. The topic of the age of Aisha radiallahu anha at the time of her marriage to the Prophet, peace be upon him, is a controversial one. Not the pseudo-controversy created by those who do not believe, but that within the Hadiths themselves. That, however, is not the purpose of this video. The age at which a female was given in marriage, or the marriage itself was consummated, was strictly a family privilege until the reign of Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, as history records, when the state began to interfere with who is old enough to get married or not. It is recorded as well that ancient Roman maidenhood did not last long. As soon as puberty was reached, betrothal and marriage usually followed. Puberty was not always the case, though, as that with the case of Octavia, the daughter of Claudius. She was only 1 year old when she was engaged to L. Junius Silanus, who was about 14 or 15 years old. Now this is in spite of the fact that Augustus ruled that the bride and the bridegroom should be able to understand what is being said during the engagement rites. According to the law, a young male could not be older than 21 years old before getting married, or he'll face a fine. So 7 years from his engagement, Junius Silanus must be married. But then Octavia, who was 1 year old at the time of the engagement, would only be 8 years old. In 12th century Europe, Gratian, who was one of the influential proponents of the canon law, accepted that the age of consent be puberty. He also said that it was meaningful if the children were older than the age of 7. So this means that the consent is not necessary if they were less than 7. These are the words of a Christian leader, Gratian. Early British laws, as recently as the 17th century, gave allowance for a wife at the age of 9 to claim the estate of her husband at his demise. The laws of our realm say that the wife which is of the age of 9 years at her husband's death shall be endowed of the third part of his lands and tenements. These are the words of Judge Swinburne. He added that if a girl of 7 is known carnally, yet the infant not having discretion to understand what is the nature of matrimony, cannot give consent to that whereof she is ignorant, and consequently the marriage cannot be good. So this is an indication that sexual intercourse with girls of 7 was probably happening at this time, 17th century Great Britain. The study of medieval records, specifically the period between 1236 to 1384 AD, show that there are females who were married at the age of 9. Some of the cases of marriages in early teens were to much older men. Now, coming up to the 19th century, in the United States of America, the usual age of consent was 10 years old. Not 7th century Arabia, but 19th century United States of America. We can clearly see the abundance of this practice in times before ours. Yet some people still ignorantly bring up the charge of pedophilia against the Prophet, peace be upon him, a word that was not adopted in the English language until the 1950s. It, however, will be legitimate if you bring up that charge, while stating that you two are from an ancestry of pedophiles, while stating that the first people to bear your last names are pedophiles, while stating that the ones whose genes make up part of your DNA are all pedophiles. Because if your ancestors are not part of the historical times that I mentioned earlier, I wonder when they existed. For those of you who are affiliated with a religion, your charge would only be legitimate if you can show where in your scriptures the age of consent is prescribed. Without that, you have no case. Plus, you two are from an ancestry of pedophiles. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.